anyway, let's kick off. So Shyamenda, thank you so much for joining us here at Social Workers Matter. Even though it says Social Worker Matter on my Social Worker Matters, that's incorrect. Yet to get that sorted, but as one of my colleagues likes to say, we love to model imperfection here, so that's absolutely fine. So Shyamenda, as I said, thank you so much for joining us. And I have to give a little bit of a disclosure before I invite you to introduce yourself. But I came across you recently when you were interviewing Dr. Yvonne Guest, who has subsequently been a guest here. And the connection was really around social work and some of the things that she had to say about her experiences as a child and how that's kind of informed her work. But it was a really fascinating interview. And then it dawned on me that you were actually interviewing her in your role as someone from an organization called Men Talk. And I thought, oh, that might be interesting to hear more about, because I'm really, really interested to hear about organizations or initiatives that are about encouraging men to talk. Although I didn't entirely know what your organization was about, but the name in itself really intrigued me. And that was when I approached you, and you gracefully agreed to be on this podcast. So that's my disclosure about how I came upon you. But please do share something about who you are and what you do. I've got a couple of things I really want to discuss with you, but let's hear from you first, and then I'll share those in a while.
Yeah, thank you very much, Sylvia. Yeah, no, it's a privilege to be asked to talk anywhere and to be seen anywhere as well. So I appreciate that. In my, I suppose, role as one of the founders of Men Talk Ubuntu, I'm just another ordinary guy, and who's also trying to get other guys to essentially talk more about some of the experiences that we're facing, the good and the bad. I think there's just this lack often of expressing ourselves and wanting always to show a certain side that society deems we should and that is valuable, whereas we ignore a lot of the person we are. With Men Talk and how it got started, predominantly during the pandemic, myself and some of my friends were obviously going through certain things, feeling the pressures at work. And for me personally, that led to engaging with a counselor and people working in mental health and that sort of thing, which I found very, very valuable. And prior to that, perhaps I wouldn't have gone to those services. I'd have been typically saying, we don't, sort stuff out, you man up, it's all good. There's people going through worse, typical stuff, and it can crush you really. So I found it just extremely helpful. It helped me reprioritize and refocus with life, and just essentially get a bit happier and just reevaluate what I was appreciating. So got through that, as did my friends, thankfully, as well, with whatever else they were facing. Some lost jobs and all that during the pandemic. Not everyone was furloughed. And we then wanted to help other men do the same thing, but we knew just having, say, a Zoom meeting, because Zoom meetings were the rage, that probably wouldn't work out. We wouldn't really get probably a lot of men signing up and wanting to speak, especially because they don't know me or anyone else from Adam. So why would they? And what we knew from our own past experiences is getting outside in nature and also away from our regular context and contacts really was something that allowed you to express yourself, and you didn't feel as though you were being judged. And it also gave you a great sense of achievement, because whatever we're doing outdoors, whether it's walking or running, hiking, whatever it be, at the end of it, as much as it's cathartic and it's nice to be out in nature, you also feel like you've accomplished something, you've done something with your day. And when you, I think men like that, we like
Yeah,
not just
yeah.
meeting up and talking, although we do, but having an end goal as well, and benefiting health. So we organized a hike to Snowdon because one of us had been there before, and he remembered getting that sense of achievement at the end. It's a
Mhm,
challenge. If
mhm.
you've not done it before, if you don't hike, a lot of Black men don't. So thankfully, quite a few turned up, and we just had one of the most beautiful days out. And I, I guess they reinforced what we'd imagined. They shared how beneficial it was. This is a range of men, different ages,
Mhm.
from different backgrounds. Some are parents, some are single, some are young, some are old. Different health situations. Some people were at peak of
Yeah.
physical fitness. Others had challenges, but they did it all the same, and we all went together. So the organization is called Men Talk Ubuntu, and it's this idea of, yes, bringing men together to talk, and the Ubuntu side being a community. So our aim is, ultimately, we have the mantra of promoting positive perceptions of Black men and mental health. But
Mhm.
underlying all that, we are trying to do our part to help strengthen our communities and relationships at home, at work, and everywhere else.
I love that. I love that. And I mean, I can absolutely see how engaging in something relatively physical in the first instance would be a good way to perhaps get some relaxation, some kind of pulling down some of the guards that might be around. um yeah, that's a really, really, really great concept. I mean, so officially, when did your organization start? Was it absolutely during the pandemic, or?
Yeah, officially, I think the formation date is something like October 2022, like when we officially filed the paperwork. Sorry, 2020,
2022.
October 2022.
You're well ahead of time.
2020, yeah. It's the
Okay.
prediction. Sorry. Yeah, October 2020. I think
Yeah.
once we actually done the walk, and we saw how impactful, how powerful it was, and we all just really loved it.
Hmm.
We were like, okay, yeah, let's actually create something. Let's get a bit more serious about helping other men and continuing to help ourselves as well. Because yeah, it's quite a thing, to stay honest, and I don't think there were as many people. There were probably people talking about mental health at the time,
Hmm.
but
Hmm.
we pretty much came to it organically or naturally. So this has very much been a case of, I'm experiencing this. I'm seeing some of the benefits of engaging with people in the mental health space. I just want to help other people do the same. It was never about let's grow the business, let's
Yeah.
do
Yeah.
crazy things.
Yeah.
That would
Yeah.
all be nice perhaps, but the focus has literally been, wow, this is a life-saving conversation, this is a life-saving service.
Mm.
Why was I so reluctant to engage with this? Why are other people so reluctant to engage with it? Let's try and just break down those barriers. And for some, it's the same. They jump in on board like we do, and they become open to, for example, speaking to a therapist or just speaking with other people about some of these things, because it's
Mm.
incredible what people go through every day and carry with them.
Mm.
So I mean, yeah, that was the whole point. And we've received a lot of support, a lot of love, especially with there's an organization called CAHN, the Caribbean and African Health Network, who do like a lot of great work trying to
Mm.
get just more people aware of what's going on with their health, and more of that work with community building and getting relationships sorted out. They cover a lot of things, and they've been very supportive of us as well. In fact, some of the events that we're currently organizing are fully because they're behind us.
Okay. Let's move on to that. I'm as you were speaking there, I was kind of intrigued to understand how you function as a group. So let's pause that for a second. But the organization you mentioned, because what I will do is to ensure that the link for that organization appears in the show notes. But it's the Caribbean, and I missed the second
African
Health Network.
Yeah, Caribbean and African Health Network.
Oh, and African. Okay, I'm with you. And African Health Network. Okay, so I'm going to make sure that that goes into the show notes as well, so that people can check out what they're doing. So back to your organization, Men Talk. How do you guys function? I mean, you set up in October 2020. Do you meet regularly? Is it a sort of a virtual kind of connection, or how does it work? What happens? You don't have to tell me the detail of what you discuss. That would be absolutely out of order. How do you guys function? You know, and one of the reasons I asked that is because, you know, it may well be that listeners to this may take inspiration from what you're doing and may want to make contact with you to find out how you did it, so they could perhaps replicate it in other places. So, you know, how do you guys function?
Sure. I mean, we're definitely always open to speak with other people, connect with other people. So do feel free if there is anything we can help with. So predominantly what we wanted to focus on is obviously creating these outdoor events and activities like hikes. We've got our YouTube channel and social media pages where we share some resources and we share snippets from the conversations that we've had with different people, because what we're trying to do is normalize the conversation around mental health. There are essentially, let's say, 4 of us in the background.
Yeah.
2 of us focusing predominantly on the podcast, because when the weather's not great, or like with COVID, when the restrictions are such that we can't gather in big groups or anything, we can keep the conversation going virtually, and people can still see like, yeah, it's okay to talk about some of these things, or it's not as bad as I thought it was, or anything like that. And then we've got the content, the social media, the walks, and what else do we do? We also what?
I was going to ask you, as you're trying to remember something there, what's the name of the podcast?
So it's just Men Talk Ubuntu podcast. So Spotify, so Apple, everywhere else as well.
We'll put a link to that as well.
Yeah, in fact, so we've got walks coming up, which are like, the next one would be February 19th.
Okay.
Saturday, February 19th. And so in terms of how the walks operate, we tend to meet at Manchester City Centre. We'll have hired a coach, and then whoever's there, it's quite an early start, my 5 a.m. but you know, compared to your health, easy sacrifice. But that's then because typically we'll go to Snowdon, which is our key event. But like this coming one on February 19th, we're heading to Scafell Pike, which is up in the Lake District.
Okay.
And so we'll get a coach, whoever turns up. And you're also welcome to make your own way there, but just try and be prompt and on time, because any delay just extends the day.
Has a knock-on effect. Yeah.
People have families and homes to get back to. So when we organize the events, that's the sort of thing we do. And the walks have been the easiest one to obviously organize with ability levels and interest. We've got loads of ideas about what we can do with indoor sports and all these other gatherings, especially as the summer opens up. And there's other ideas about networking events, or just creating spaces where people can come together. But a lot of the time what we're trying to do is, you know, we've all got jobs. So this is something we just sort of do out of, should we say, passion, and because like I said, we've seen the benefits, and some of these things have been life-saving, like say for myself personally. So I just want to make sure other people are aware, and if they have all these barriers against addressing some of the mental health issues or challenges that they're facing, and this could be through work, through the relationships, whatever is causing it, just to be open to try and seek the help, because it doesn't take much, and it doesn't mean you're going to have to change, or all sorts. Anyway, I'll get off that
Yeah,
high
yeah,
horse.
it's
It's
really interesting.
essentially, yeah, I've just, a big part of it has also just been, and this is part of my own, I guess, personal journey, just being proud and happy to be Black, and seeing that people from my ethnicity, background, whatever culture, are also out here doing quite well and working in industries I was never aware of. And that's been one of the powerful things with, I think, with our podcast guests. A lot of them
Yeah,
work in very different fields. So, for example, like, we have a conversation with Dr. Yvonne Guest, which was just mind blowing. Love
yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah.
But when you see that there is someone doing research based on some of these experiences that they've gone through and how it's shaped their lives, and they're really passionate and committed to it. Before seeing Dr. Guest, someone, especially, it doesn't have to be a young listener, it can even be an older listener, they can now go, that could be me.
Yeah.
I think sometimes we miss that, we forget that, I mean, with social workers matters, I will make up a disproportionate, I'll say, percentage of the people working in these fields, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, even when we look to the pandemic, why are the people who are no, that's not
Well, well,
yeah,
it's all part of it, isn't it? I
yeah,
mean,
yeah, I guess, yeah, it's all part of it. So it's
yeah, we
like,
can't pretend that's not a part of it. We are
yeah,
the ones who are at the front line.
exactly.
We are
And
the ones who are suffering losses and so on to a greater extent.
yeah, and
Um,
everyone can relate to it when they put it up on the, say, in general, all the health workers are suffering and all this stuff. But again, if we drill down to the numbers and we see the people who are frontline facing,
yeah.
and then this starts to explain why we were seeing at those early stages the Black, African, and Caribbean portion of the population were the worst affected. It's because we end up working in a lot of these fields,
Yeah.
and it's also because we see a lot of ourselves in those lower levels of the roles. We don't see ourselves always in the higher up. They're there, but we're not
Mm-hmm.
always visible
Mm-hmm.
and within reach. So part of it is also to give that aspirational injection in people's lives, and just think
Yeah.
like, you
Yeah.
don't have to stay in whatever sector or industry that you're in, and there are a lot of options open to us. And we don't just say that. You can see the people working there, you
Mm-hmm.
can hear some of them are still on the journey, you can hear how they're trying to get there, and we don't have to, yeah, anyway. So part of
Well, no,
it's
I
that
mean,
as well.
yeah, and I mean, I think you're kind of also referring to some of the themes that have emerged in the course of, the work that you're doing around Men Talk, um, and that specific issue relates obviously to career and career progression or not, um, and some of the sort of realities of where we as Black people tend to be located in some of these structures. So that's one set of themes. And you mentioned a couple of other themes that have come up in your discussions in Men Talk around relationships. I heard you say something about, I think you mentioned parenting. I'm not entirely sure. It usually goes hand in hand. But without obviously disclosing any confidentialities, what are some of the other themes that come up in the discussions that you guys have had?
Yeah,
Yeah,
of
just give us
course.
a
Yeah.
headline of the kinds of themes. Oh yes, the other one was work, wasn't it? And the loss of work and so on. That was another
Yes,
theme
yeah,
I heard
yeah, because
initially.
that, that was real.
Big one, yeah, yeah,
Still
wow.
real. I mean, because I suppose a lot of these things underpin some of our anxieties or the way that we've come to shape life, and a mixture. So we have some of these discussions during the hikes and activities we organize, and a lot of them, like say, come out during the podcast.
Okay,
So
so
yeah,
as
there's.
you're walking,
Oh yeah,
sometimes
yeah, yeah. Oh
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
So I should have probably clarified that when you're
No, no,
asking
no,
about
because
how we
you know
organize. Like,
why I can relate to that. I mean,
yeah,
with some of my network, we do something similar, but it's more family based. But some of the most interesting discussions come up as we're walking. All kinds of discussions come up as you're walking with, let's say, one or two other people, and then
yes,
rapping about no.
yeah,
So I
yeah.
can
No, this is
see how that
exactly it.
happens.
So one of the ways we wanted to structure the walks was it's not just a walk. We have an agenda and a theme, but we don't force it on anyone. But the whole idea is when we're out there, we split into groups of 2 or 3, depending on how the numbers are. And we will rotate that sort of every 40 minutes to an hour. So you get a chance to speak with everyone who's there. Everyone does that, you know. And yeah, we've given these rough things we can talk about, like starting points or talking points, but they only cover a little bit. The idea is we're going to open up. And like you say, it's just, there's a weird but magical thing. And I think Ray likes to say this. It's like when you're walking shoulder to shoulder rather than face to face or something, there also seems to be this more natural way of just speaking. It's almost like you don't feel as restricted or as guarded. And so, yeah, we found that does work really well. So some of the things emerge during the walk, some of them during the interviews that we have, and just discussions behind the scenes and all that sort of thing. But relationships are up there, but that's life, right? Like I said, and that ties to parenthood. And what one of the, again, because we work and everything, there's so many things we want to do, like parents at different stages as well. But we've been particularly interested in these discussions with younger parents, you know, and some of those challenges they're facing right at the beginning, and the things we don't know about when we're entering parenthood that come as a shock and a surprise. And just, there's, it's a lot of interesting thoughts. Related to that is also motherhood. So some of the guests we have, obviously also women, it's men talk, but we're open and we're for everyone. And even hearing the mother's perspective and some of the challenges that they face, or the way that they believe that they're being perceived or judged as a mother at the beginning or later on. These are the things that when you sit at home, they sit with you. And no one else might know, and everyone else might be looking in and thinking a certain thing, but they affect you personally, you know. And so trying to get those out so that other people can hear them and go, I had no idea. Like I wouldn't, like when someone becomes a mom, I think, oh, okay, cool, they're good. I don't know they feel judged. There's all sorts of things, like, you know, which we can get into. But so essentially, relationships, parenthood, finances have always come up.
Finances are biggie.
Well, I mean, we even did a webinar with 2 great speakers as well, where we're talking about finances and sort of mortgages and securing loans, all that sort of thing. So, you know, we try and match some of the things we do based on what people are asking or curious about. What else has been asked? Education, I think that's sort of come up, but education and training in a way. A lot of people want to even go into things like entrepreneurship and consulting, but you know, you still have to get educated around these things. So I guess there's the formal education and other kinds of education that we can do to enter different fields, and even just financial education to get to know what we need to do for the things that we're aspiring towards, the houses, the cars, and all these other things. I think those would be probably some of the main ones. Of course, mental health, but mental health we can unpack into so many things, and it's ultimately being affected. But yeah, mental health and mental health professionals, I think that's been really insightful, hearing from people working in the mental health space and them giving a bit of an account of what it's like. For me personally, people being able to just see these individuals and go, that's a normal human being. You know, I think it's one thing when people think, or, oh, I'm going to have to tell people I'm seeing a psychiatrist or a psychotherapist or a counselor. It's another thing when you hear their story, how they got into the field. You see that they've got their own issues, that they see a professional as well. Then you just go, again, it's a normal person. Doesn't mean anything's wrong with me. This is just part of life. Because the worst thing is to have all these things going on and have no one you can speak honestly and openly to.
Well, I mean, I think what you've shared is really, really powerful, and I am really heartened by the fact that younger people, and you know, I'm talking about younger Black people, are more embracing of talking therapies, and they see the necessity for it if they're struggling. And I hope that that goes from strength to strength, because to articulate one's pain and what one might be going through it's such a life skill. And it can improve it can have lots of spin-offs, better relationships, where people can express themselves more fully. I was watching something this morning, interestingly, about a guy who is of Aboriginal descent in Australia, and he's part of a men's group. Right. And talked about, his he's not uncomfortable to cry when he needs to. He's not uncomfortable to show emotions when he feels them. But it's been a journey. It's been an absolute journey, and I think it's so sad when you hear of people who can't do that, who don't feel able to do that, particularly men, and who go through drastic measures. Are people kind of? I mean, you identified anxiety as one of the main sorts of mental health issues that you've kind of encountered in your group. Have you seen people initially feel uncomfortable, but then over time have become more comfortable with expressing themselves? Or what's been your observation of how this sort of thing has impacted on men?
I want to say I'm going to be biased. Yeah, I think one of the blessings, the joys that it's been, we found, at least when we do the events and when we have people speaking, they are able to open up. And that's often one of the most valuable pieces of feedback we get at the end of an event, when people are feeding back like they needed this, and that they were just grateful to have people around that they could speak to, even myself included, because even though you might go on the walk thinking, maybe I've got this one thing I'm going to say, and I'm not going to talk about all this other stuff. But as you're walking, and sometimes you get other people sharing and topics arise, so much can come off your chest you didn't even know was really there. So at the end, you just feel unburdened. And like you said, I think it's a key skill. There's no way I could have some of the conversations I'm having now if I hadn't seen a counselor or gone through some therapy. Like no way whatsoever. And I know that the depth of and the quality of the conversations I'm having are much better, and I'm able to help guide someone out of certain, I'm not going to fix them or anything like that. That's not the goal, but I'm able to guide them out of certain ways of thinking, or just expose them to a different perspective. But because I kind of know how that's done and where to leave it, and not try and push, because there's even ways that some of us communicate, especially as men. We want to problem solve and fix everything. And because that's why we originally, when we started organizing the hikes, we wanted to make sure there was always either a therapist or a counselor, someone from a mental health background there, not to run a session, but just because they've got the tools when it comes to having these conversations. Like if you go for a walk and someone starts to reveal something that's really heavy, and let's say they go down, how do you get them out of that? You don't just say, oh, get over it, So to have someone there who knows how to navigate conversations is also really, really crucial.
Let me ask you, before it runs out of my mind, what do you think is the value of Black men coming together? Share something of that. Share some of your thoughts on that. What's been your experience of being in a group of Black men?
Yeah, okay. I think that's unburdened me. My experience.
Yeah.
I can only speak from my experience. Yeah, cool.
Sorry about that. Yeah.
So I think no, because I was there thinking, I need to watch how I say it. But if it's just based on me,
start from the eye. That's
all I can do. All right. So for me personally, feeling like like I mentioned before, like I feeling just proud to be a Black man. As weird as it sounds, like we might say it and we might refer to stuff when we're talking about music, but literally to feel like that and to see other Black men around me and to know that they're striving and to want to be part of a strong community, I think that that community is very undertapped. I think a lot of us tend to go off on our own thing. We'll meet up when it's fun, usually, but I don't think we meet up as much to look out for each other or to build each other up. And we hear these things loosely when we're talking about other communities and how well they stick together and how well the money circulates within communities. I think that was one of the insights. So number one, the value in Black men getting together, a sense of pride, which comes with a sense of identity and feeling proud about our identity. And a lot of us have done research into our history and heritage, and we share that. And I think one of the other things, the second thing, which is we don't publicly speak on it that much, but it's one of the things we're really passionate about doing, is connecting the different generations. The young, the current, all these different generations, because especially in the Black family, I think we don't see those different generations sitting together and exchanging knowledge and just even encouragement. Weddings, funerals, celebrations, but just to sit down, hey, this is how I navigated it, this is the career I'm in, and not just the young ones are thinking about becoming footballers. It's like, well, why is that? Because they don't talk to the people who are currently in work or who've retired and just ask, because they're not also good at publicizing it, because I don't think we tend to be, as Black people don't tend to say what we're doing, like, hey, you mind your business about my money,
That's right. That's right. I mean, when I think about some of the valuable advice and insights that could be shared, if let's stay with the financial thing, but we absolutely don't share that. We don't talk about that. We as you say, these are closely guarded secrets, which perhaps aren't necessarily so helpful in terms of the wider community. Do you think then that, because I'm seeing a lot of initiatives in the virtual space, in the social media space, that seem to me to be quite positive in perhaps promoting some of that community. I know you're big on communication, but I see a lot of that activity going on. Do you think that those things are helpful? Those initiatives are helpful?
I think they are. I think anything that adds is a good, like, be it one person, be it 1,000 pages, it might distribute stuff. One way to think is, oh, they're taking away, but the reality is we'll never be able to get everyone. So I think everyone who's doing it, good for them. I know sometimes some people just ride the bandwagon and they see it as an opportunity to just squeeze out something for themselves. That's not so good, and online makes that very easy to do. Building a community in person, I mean, even to be fair, respectfully, even online is very, very challenging. We face a lot of challenges with trying to build a community, but I think doing so in person, because you're trying to really talk about some of these heavy things, it lends itself to that. Like, it's better in person. But whatever people feel comfortable with, we're talking about mental health and talking about some of the sometimes traumas people have gone through, or to be honest, also things that they've done that aren't so great, because we're not always the hero in the story, right? So that's not the easiest.
That's right.
It's not the easiest thing to do. And there's one of our former guests called Denzel has a page, I think, called My Mental Health UK. So he does a lot of anonymous feedback, if you will, or anonymous interaction with some of the people who are in his audience, because he appreciates, I suppose, that some people just aren't ready to be in person with others or to share openly some of these things that either have shaped them or affected them, but they still want to get them off their chest, and to do so anonymously is all right. And that's one of the things.
That sounds really productive.
Yes. Yeah. And also, obviously, like, some of the people we've worked with, interacted with, are based all over the world. I should say I was going to say the UK, yes, but there's some in Australia, similar to, like you sort of mentioned, there's some in the Caribbean islands, there's some in the US. we've got some people where some parts of Europe as well, so
Mhm.
even Africa. So it's like the conversation is there, and it's starting to emerge more and more.
Mm.
It's just hopefully it just continues, really. But I think it's all helpful, and there are a lot of bigger channels and brands or whatever that
Mm.
I think everyone just trying to lend a hand. It's a great thing.
Yeah, no, I mean, that sounds really positive, and it sounds as though it's gaining momentum. Um,
I think the ladies are much better at it than we are, to be fair,
well,
as well. I
what
mean,
can I say?
that's what we've seen. What can you say? I mean,
What
evidently,
can I
right?
say? You're
um,
right. But no, I mean, without being too smug about it, I mean, obviously and I'm thinking again, as a Black woman, we too have our challenges. So it can only be for the betterment if we improve our levels of communication, openness, and that point that you made about the sort of inherent trauma that we either live with or perpetuate is something that we need to talk more about. So no, it sounds really, really positive. Okay, well, thank you so much, Shyamenda, for sharing that side of your what is it, work? Would you call it, work?
Life.
Life. That's right. Yeah, yeah. That side of your life. Yeah, I really thank you for being so generous with that. And no doubt there is much more we can speak about as far as that's concerned. And again, in the future, it may well be that we will reconnect on some of those issues, because I think the conversation is never over, really, as far as that's concerned. I want to switch gears a little bit now to another side of your life, which is the sort of academic side of your life. And I'm aware that you are a PhD student, and that you are really interested in leadership, and in particular, authentic leadership. And I have some interest in that area. But this is almost like a little rehearsal for your Viva.
Oh gosh, oh no.
Put you on the back foot there. Share with us a bit about that, because I think, again, some of the themes from that area of interest will be useful for some of our audience. So I'd like to hear a little bit about that, where the interest came from, who you're drawing from in terms of what you're seeking to research. So share a bit with us about that.
Okay, sure. So
It's a
the
bit of a switch,
interest, yeah, quite a switch. I think originally the interest was, if I was to track it, there was a point where I was sort of reflecting. I'll track it back to 2011, and I read Authentic Happiness by Dr. Martin, I think E.P. Seligman, US academic. And that, yeah, so I guess I was always curious about this idea of being happy and being authentic. And I've always had a keen interest in leadership. I felt personally for a while like I was one of those people who would end up pushed into a position of leadership, but I never really wanted it, all that sort of thing. And anyway, so I studied in undergrad and my master's. I was in human resource management, because I'd always wanted to go into management and improve the workplace. Like, I've always loved working, and I always thought, hopefully, I could help leaders and other people do it. Then, I don't know, I just started getting more curious, I suppose, about the development side. I've always been curious about psychology and childhood development and all these sorts of things, but started to think about how I could make an impact. So I used to think it'll be through going the HR way and developing policies and helping organizations become more compliant or treat people better. But eventually, all that led to trying to come to an understanding of how leaders are actually developed, because we say that they're the ones who run the organizations and dictate what everyone's going to do, what's right, what's wrong, where the resources go. So I started to think about that, and being in a university setting, getting more curious about how universities are, what's the role that they play, which is stuff that's been explored a lot, especially following like the 2008, 2010 financial crisis. Leadership was really seen as being in a point of crisis. Everyone lost faith in it. Everyone lost trust. Like, our leaders are not great. And I think even the Gallup studies about employees trusting their senior managers and leaders, they've been low for quite a while. Like, more
Yes,
people
yes.
don't. And we know about disengagement going on the rise, which, also linked to stress, anxiety, all those sorts of things. So all of those things were driving me, getting me more curious. And because I'd wanted to do research in different areas, and I was proposing to try and do it, and to get some sort of funding, and I wasn't successful for a few years. Eventually, with the authentic leadership one, it just, I guess it resonated with me a lot more. So maybe my proposal was a lot stronger, and it matched up with some of the research interests that were going on at my university, Manchester Metropolitan University. So yeah, thankfully I got a partial funding. So while doing research and teaching alongside that to carry on through life. So my particular interest, yes, being authentic leadership development. Part of what we see is, I guess, how leadership has changed over the years. Well, since it started to get researched, because it's not like people have been writing papers about leaders, or people are making hieroglyphs about the Pharaoh's leadership style, that type of thing. But since it's been getting researched, it's evolved a lot, just as the way that we run our businesses has evolved. The easiest way to think about it is going from focusing on the processes, because organizations are relatively new invention, or the way that they run. Companies didn't really exist like that for a long time. They weren't producing all the goods that we see now. So there was a lot more just agriculture and that sort of thing. So as organizations started to take shape, the first thing you try and figure out is how to maximize economies of scale and production. So we've got the 4 days. You're focusing on the process, you're not focusing on the people. It's like a science. How can we produce and maximize our profits? Over time, things start to change, and people start to get considered more, and we start to see how people can actually be the most valuable resource for an organization, not just the products they have or the processes that they have. And if you treat the people right, you can get new ideas, new products, and you can flourish. You can do the best that you can. Then there's always a bit of a dance between the leaders and those in charge, and the people that they're trying to, I guess, I don't want to say exploit, because that's like a capitalism thing. Like the people they're trying to get
That's a whole other
produce.
podcast.
Yes,
Anyway.
yeah. So I was curious about that, and how leadership has been changing up until this point. We get to with authentic leadership, where we're not just looking at the leader and how they lead people, but also how they develop the people around them, how aware they are of the impact that they're having on people and that people are having on them. And so it's a lot of stuff that I've personally experienced, so it was resonating a lot. And if you talk to people in general, they want that, or they're all curious about how they as a leader can really have an impact on the people that they employ. They want to do good, and the people that are employed, they don't want to feel helpless and not just empowered or told what to do. They want to also be, typically in a work situation, everyone wants to have some sort of autonomy. So yeah, authentic leadership kind of goes in that way. Who do I draw from? Predominantly, I try and look at, there's the work of, it's kind of like three main authors, and this was around, they wrote a lot in like between 2005 to 2008, 2010. They switched into other fields afterwards. And there's a guy also called Bruce Bill George, sorry, who wrote about authentic leadership. I think he was a Harvard professor at the time, and he popularized the concept a lot and gave it, I guess, a bit more credibility. But the main ones I draw from are, I think they're called Bruce Avolio, Fred Avolio Walumba. God, it's escaping me. You put me on the spot. But
That's
there's
all
like,
right.
let's say there's three main ones. I'm sure it'll come back to me maybe at some point.
Well,
But I focus on the way that they break down authentic leadership into four components. You know, there's work on how they got to the four components. Anyway, yeah, and let's say it's self-awareness, balanced processing of information, relational transparency, and internal moralized perspective. So it gives you four lenses of looking at people's behaviors, actions, what they do, and putting them into those four, and we can see whether they're an authentic leader or individual based on, you know, how much of that they're feeling.
Can I ask you, Shyamenda, once we finish,
Yeah,
get those names for me, and then I'll put them in the show notes, because I think that some folk will find it really useful to look into some of these authors and their ideas.
sure. There's a lot written about. That's why I focus
Yeah,
on.
yeah.
Kind of
And
like
I mean,
the
I'm
originator.
sort of reading something else myself at the moment, but what's valuable, I guess, about this research as well, is that you can ultimately go on to perhaps work with leaders if that's what you choose to do. But also in terms of what you're trying to create, or what you're creating in terms of men's talk, or anything that you subsequently go on to create, there's probably a helpful framework there to how one develops an organization from the get-go. So I think that's where I kind of see the link in terms of what you were speaking about earlier, and what this particular academic interest that you have can grow and thrive.
Absolutely.
Right.
I mean, I've definitely, one of the future outcomes when there's time and all this stuff to be able to put these things together is leadership conference, you know.
Yeah.
To
Excellent. Yeah. Make sure you send me a free ticket.
Of course. No free lunches. We'll get you talking or doing a workshop or something, you know.
All right. Okay. Well, I don't mind. But so, you know, okay. So thanks for sharing that. I think that this is, again, another area that we could talk again about in the future more fully. So, you know, keep your eye on that emails, because when I again start to trouble you for another episode.
No, never trouble, always a treat.
that's certainly a direction I like to go in. Now listen, Shyamenda, I'm really, really conscious of the time and your time. And I just would like to thank you for agreeing to share some of your thoughts, your ideas, your work with us here at Social Workers Matter. Do you have any final thoughts that you could share with us? Not necessarily on the leadership side, because what we spent most of the time talking about today is the Men Talk work, Men Talk Ubuntu. Are there any final thoughts you might want to share with us?
Sure. I mean, I just say we're like I say, we're trying to build a community one person at a time. Yeah. And if you are part of even another organization doing something similar or not, just feel free to connect, say hello. Like I say, we're just some guys who work and do this on the side. So we know we can't do everything, and I'm sure you know you can't do everything. So feel free to connect with us, and you know, let's all be part of one big happy community, because we're all trying to do some good in the world.
Fantastic. So you're on Facebook.
Instagram, YouTube, Twitter,
and
LinkedIn. Yep. And we're on all the usual podcast channels, Spotify, Apple Podcast. I think we're on the Google Play one as well.
Okay, brilliant.
I'll look for us. We're not hard to find.
Yeah, excellent. I'll put those links in the show notes so people can follow that up.
And
So, my dear,
if you're local around Manchester and you want to come around for the February 19th, or I think March 19th as well, for a
you
walk.
better talk about March 19th, because this ain't going to get put out before the 19th of Feb.
March 19th.
Yes, my brother.
We
That's when
should
it's
be going
it
up
should be out by
Snowdon.
then. Yeah, yeah.
So sign up or get in touch if you got any questions.
Okay.
Yeah, and just support local community.
Brilliant. Actually, that's what I was going to ask you. I forgot to ask. I mean, you did say that you have quite a wide reach in terms of, international sort of
Yeah, I
links.
mean, we've got engagement internationally. The
Oh yeah,
numbers aren't
okay.
amazing, but we've got some connections, and we're like I say, we're always open to the conversation and just learning what other people are doing, and because some people are much more effective at some of the content creation than we are, but a lot of people are trying to do the same things that we're trying to do. It seems like a global appetite, if you will,
Yes,
for this
absolutely,
addressing of mental health, in particular for Black men or men in general. Like we're just speaking out a bit more, and we want to get better. I think rather than speaking out, we're all trying to heal and get better and be productive. That's the end goal. Like it's never about we're going to talk about these things and that'll be it. We'll, let's say cry or whatever, but we're ultimately trying to address these things so that we can move forward and live healthier, fuller lives.
I think what I would, I guess, love to hear is that in other parts of the country, very similar initiatives are kind of sprouting up, and who knows, there may well be, but yeah, because I think a vision of kind of coming together is a great one, because it's absolutely needed. And then, sharing knowledge and sharing strategies and how you're working and so on.
Yeah, we all win. Like honestly, we're such a new player. Like there are so many pre-existing organizations. Like that's how we came across CAHN, the Caribbean African Health Network, because they've been doing this stuff for years, and we've got, should we say, the ways that we do things that are different, and we engage with a certain group. But there are organizations that have existed. Like everyone knows about the Samaritans, everyone knows about these big firms. Mind is really also gained a lot of popularity. Like everyone knows about those, but there are also loads of little other charities or ones that you've not heard about. But they may have existed for decades, and we're just always trying to tap in with them, learn with them, see how we can support them, because that's the whole idea. It's not just about us trying to help individuals who will then have better relationships and help their communities. We're trying to become part of this community. Just going back to that, now we're proud, we're proud to be Black, and we're proud to help other people. Like let's find all these other organizations and learn from them. And so encourage everyone to do the same.
Right. Well, I will certainly be one of your followers, and thank you again so much for joining us today, and spending and being so generous with your time. And hopefully we can reconnect again in future to have discussions on other topics that are absolutely relevant. So thank you, my dear.